I notice behind you, and this is great because the subject of the discussion is remaking the democratic world order 75 years after the Second World War. And it's interesting that right behind you, you've got quite a bit of the democratic world order on either side of the Polish flag. You have the NATO flag on one side, you have the European Union flag on the other. Does that make you feel safer than if those two institutions somehow didn't exist?
When I started my career, there was a completely different dimension. And I always say everything is possible in our life. I joined the army in 1987. It was a completely different world. And I remember first time actually in the Czech Republic when I met U.S. officer, and we had a lot of long discussions about perceptions from completely two different sides of a hill. And right now I'm in Poles, we are in the proper side, but world is still dynamic, and we are surprised nearly every month. We had a couple of discussions in my headquarters, what happened in 2020 in 1 year, which is not finished yet. And so a lot of things still. So flexibility is one of the, and adaptation, it's the most useful words.
Well, adaptation is, and it's interesting, isn't it? And this really is my first question to you, because speaking to us from Warsaw, you have Russia very close to where you are, and Russia has proved to be an aggressive nation, especially towards some of the countries of the former Soviet Union, such as Ukraine and Georgia. I know this is a difficult question, but it's kind of important, I think, for people who grew up with institutions like NATO and the European Union and perhaps take them for granted. Imagine a world in which these democratic institutions didn't exist. As chief of the Polish General Staff, I put it to you, you'd be in a much more precarious situation as a sovereign democracy today than if organizations like NATO and the EU didn't exist.
I would answer that way. From the Polish perspective, the most important is the historical context. And I'm 2.5 years chief of defense and still going to my counterparts, and we're discussing a lot of issues concerning security. Always we're going back to the history, and from a different capital cities, the perspective of what we're doing is completely different. So Poland, when we discuss many times really what's going on today, we had the feeling that we have to move back much more than we would think. So we moved to the 18th century to realize what happened in Poland, what didn't happen in Poland was even more important. What happened in the world? What kind of processes in the politics, in the economy, in technology, and also military security happened. And that was a fascinating trip. So let's say there's a 1772, which is very important for America, for example, the calibration of the timeline. And that was the time when Poland disappeared completely from a map. There was a partition, and we lost because we didn't have enough effective economical system. With those another part of all of the the Greenland part of the world. I mean, connections across Atlantic, and after Christopher Columbus processes and the revolution as well in England when the first Watt machine was discovered and introduced. So Poland disappeared completely. So all of those events in the history, like Washington, what happened in France during the revolution, as well as civil war in the United States and the revolution in Russia, there was a time when there was no Poland on the map completely. So we didn't have a chance to participate in the historical events. And what happened in 1918, when after 123 years, Poland, Poland is again on a map of Europe. We had only a couple of years, 1918 up to Second World War, when we would try to put to the one system three different realities, different political system from three partitions, different education, financial, and also military. And then the Second World War, and after Second World War, the communism time. So the historical context is extremely important. So we didn't participate in many processes in Europe, many processes in the world. And right now, after 1918, when all of those changes in the euro happened, we moving and speeding up the processes, but the country, the culture, institutions, and which the military is one of them, they have some kind of a delay. So I see sometimes during the discussions unnecessarily simplification of certain explanation of those processes. So it takes a time. We're going in a good direction, but also if you're studying, I'm military, so my understanding is very physical. Space. We are in the historical crossroad, I would say. Poland is between the Baltic Sea and the Black Sea. There's a connection between north and south is absolutely critical. This line is going just across the Warsaw. And then we have an additional connection from Moscow to Berlin, or from Moscow to the western part of Europe. So again, Warsaw is just exactly in the middle. So anything happened in history, the movement, trade, and also force projection in both directions was exactly in the middle of this place, lovely called Poland. So to be honest, I cannot imagine in any kind of architecture, Poland alone, without the contribution of such organization like European Union or NATO. It's absolutely, it's impossible.
When we go a little further afield, outside the European domain and the Eurasian domain, and go into East Asia, clearly there is a major question about the strategic ambitions of China. And China, of course, is a rising power. It's enormously significant economically. It's growing militarily. There's a great concern that China is interfering in democracies around the world, certainly in the United States, in Great Britain, in Central Eastern Europe very much as well. There's been a major concern. In fact, we put out, I don't know whether you've seen this, we just put out a handbook for democracies on China, and it's available in English, in French, and in Chinese as well. And really what we are trying to do, and a lot of people are trying to do at this time, is to rethink the way we look at China. And as we do that, we also have to think about global institutions. I mean, China, of course, is a member of the United Nations Security Council. It's present in many international institutions. And I guess we've already seen this to some extent with Russia under Vladimir Putin. When you have a non-democratic power, especially one as powerful as China, how do we even sensibly talk about remaking the democratic world order? What does that actually mean in practice?
Well, you'll be surprised how many times we discuss China and Poland. And again, from very historical point of view, we are very Polish soil oriented, because after such a long term of not existing, we have a need to feel and rethink many things in Poland entirely. But in the same time, in the interconnection world, in the globalized world, which is nice, we have some kind of we experienced some strategical pause when the U.S. Navy was taking care about all of the flow of goods in the world without the visibility. So nobody was able to see really all of those mechanisms from the harbors of European ports like Germany or Netherlands or Poland. What happened when the flow of flow of goods trade is going across the Indian Ocean and then Malacca Strait and back to the China? That was not unnatural for Poland. We are land oriented, and then we started to study what's really going on in the West Pacific, and our perspective is not necessarily to be very engaged. It's much more for global powers, for big countries. We are European oriented. But just to understand, and from a security point of view, you mentioned the political implications and as well economical growth and rising of China, but also from a security point of view, what we really concern in Europe and also in Poland is something what we call the vacuum, security vacuum. If the United States, they don't have enough assets and resources to keep the security in Europe, and they will be engaged in the Far East. So I think China is more about the numbers of sometimes incredible numbers and economical growth, but also is a completely different civilization. So sometimes I get a feeling that we compare uncomparable things. Mm-hmm. The standards in China, meaning of a human being, or society, law is completely different in such a civilization. So we need more discussion to understand each other. Automatically, in a very reactive way, we're talking only about 5G, artificial intelligence, gathering data, different standards, and so on. But if you ask in Chinese, they don't care. It works. There's some kind of a social acceptance as well. So we have to compare, similar things, the same standards. So China definitely is one of the most important challenges. What we suffer in here is how to calibrate radar of NATO and how to classify the China. Is it the China opportunity? Is it China challenge? Or is it China really big security threat? So still big discussion in this part of the world. For Poland, this is the linkage between United States and China, and the rivalry of two big powers, and how the Russia will be engaged in such a game. So will be more used by, I would say, by China in the Far East direction, or will be the vacuum effect in the Europe, and will be much more, opportunities for Russia to engage in this part of the world and the Europe, which is extremely dangerous for Poland, for sure.
I've spoken to people inside NATO very recently, in fact, and one of the on this subject of China, one of the things that even people who actually work in NATO say they've been very pleasantly surprised that all members of NATO have really come together in the last couple of years in recognition that China is a strategic challenge that needs to be understood and, where necessary, needs to be met and pushed back against. I wonder, in the cyber domain in particular, which must be something that you've also had to have dealings with regard to Russia, is that how central to the Polish military and strategic considerations of Poland is the cyber challenge coming from Russia, but also coming from China?
Yeah, absolutely critical. So we are engaged heavily in all of those processes, discussing, but also my political masters, my Minister of Defense, we established a cyber command. So absolutely separate institutional identity to take care only about the cyber things. So it is very visible. It's I would say a part of our wargaming, of training exercises as well. So we're trying to build as much realistic scenarios as possible. Completely different domain. Cyber is which is kind of a controversial. Most of the domains where we fought for hundreds or thousands of years as militaries, land, air, and maritime, was not designed by a human being. And now the human being is so smart that design a new domain, and this domain is a trouble for us. But I would comment this issue that way. It's a matter of a price of security. So 100% of discussion when I see is balancing between the money-driven, very business-oriented model concerning 5G. Chinese providing pretty good offer for 5G infrastructure, high quality. They're pretty good, and at the same time, very, very good from an economical point of view, from a business model point of view, is very, very attractive. But at the same time, is a question. We like something which is economically better, or is better for economy, for security. It's not the same. And now is a point, who is decision maker to decide this technology is exactly what we want, and this is one is not acceptable because the different standards and the huge trade, a huge threat of different countries' penetration, so different standards. That's my observation. 100% of discussion is how much is too much, and the tendency to go to the money-driven model is very, very strong. And the army, we say absolutely not. We get evidences. We're discussing entirely in Poland. We're discussing in the NATO, on the NATO platform, but also in a bilateral. I was a couple of times in Estonia and also UK discussing. There is no question about it. Is a direct threat for infrastructure, critical infrastructure of a country, which is a new challenge for the army today. Is not only about the army's infrastructure. We are pretty good, to be honest, and we have a lot of cyber attacks, and still our defensive system is effective enough. But there's no question about the military. Banks, institutions, hospitals, so civilian critical infrastructure, which is outside of the army. So we have to take care about and link in a very complex system, military infrastructure as well as civilian one. So if the Chinese they find a weak point in one bank or in one hospital, entire system is in a big danger. So we got evidences, we have a measurement. This is the big threat for sure. So my option will be very careful, security first, and then the business. But I'm military.
Just a final question, and this relates to the European Union, which is, well, of course, one of the big building blocks of the global democratic alliance architecture. Of course, Britain left the European Union in January, and there are negotiations which are in their final phase right now for the post-Brexit future relationship. At the strategic level, have you in fact spoken to your counterpart in the UK about the strategic implications after Britain has fully left the European Union? I mean, and are you in any way concerned? I mean, of course, the UK is part of NATO, and that's really where the strategic dimension is most obviously expressed. But I think right now there are a lot of people who are kind of concerned about whether Britain is going to remain as engaged as a European member of NATO for the foreseeable future. So how do you see that?
It's extremely complex the situation. There's no one simple answer, because the security today is not only the military one. Everything is linked. And from economical, political point of view, I would left for politicians and for people in the business how to deal with the very complex, divorcing process. But in the same time, when I've been to Ireland, for example, and I talked to the Ireland Chief of Defence as well as the UK, if there will be, completed the withdrawal, how about the border, which is a security issue, and many others. So my feeling is I got a very good communication with the Chief of Defence in the UK, and we're talking a lot about the NATO issues. So if the European Union EU contribution is over, we still got a concerning security platform, very effective tool. NATO. So I don't think it will be something special, but interaction, interconnections, economy, business. We see exactly today the military instruments of power are not so high in this priorities. Even if you're tracking what the Russians are doing, so low intensity, proxy, the military companies, private companies, and so on. So purely military approach is leading to nowhere. So European Union is very important from a strategical point of view, and the UK. If you leave European Union also in a military structure as well, because European Union has a military domain as well, that will be a big challenge for everybody.
General Andrzejczak, thank you so much for joining us at HFX 2020. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much indeed. All the best. Stay stay positive, COVID negative, we say in Poland.
That's a good line. I'm going to use that, but I won't attribute it to you. How's that?
Okay. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks so much. All the best to you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.